Hello, welcome back. In this tutorial I'm going to show you how to create a Django project from scratch. I'm also going to take you through the basics of Django. We are going to see how to create a Django application. We are going to look at how to add routes to your Django application. We are going to look at Django templates. We are going to look at models. We are going to look at migrations, Django database. We are going to see how to link Django templates, how to navigate from one template to another. We are also going to look at Django models and how to insert information into your DB using the Django forms. So basically this tutorial is going to be good for beginners. If you're new to Django or Python programming in Django, this is the best tutorial for you, so I'll ask you to just follow along as we go on. So let's get started. Okay, so at this point here I expect you to have your machine ready, your development environment ready. I expect you to be having your Python installed on the machine. If you don't know how to install Python on the machine, check in my tutorials. I expect you to have installed the Django already and have set up the Django virtual environment. So we are not going to go into the installation process. I already have videos on that, so you can just check on this channel. And also we are just going to start by creating a new project, and then we shall continue from there. Alright, so I'm going to create a folder where we're going to store our project. So call it coding. I'll go ahead and open this in command line. Right, so when you're creating a Django project, the command that you use is part of the commands that are provided by Django admin. So for you to create a new project, you type Django admin, then the command is start project, followed by the project name. So the project name can be anything, but the Django admin and start project must be the same. They must look like this, and lowercase and the same spelling and syntax. So I'm going to call the project coding. Coding proj. So press enter. When it takes us to the next line, it means that our Django project has been created successfully. So right now, if I go back and check in the folder, our project has been created. So you see the project is inside this folder. So sometimes if you're not interested in creating your project, and then you have this redundancy of having two folders, one in the other, what you can do, let me just delete this project. Let me just delete this from our directory. What you can do is to type Django admin start project, and then the project name. After the project name, you put space and then dot. The dot has been put this side. So let me just minimize this. Let me just minimize this so that you can see properly what I mean. Alright, so Django admin start project, and then the project name space dot. So when you put space dot, it is going to create a project, but it will not put it inside another folder, meaning that it is not going to create another folder, but rather it will just put the project content into this directory. So I'll go ahead and press enter. So let's see what we have here. So it has created our project, and it has not enclosed it in another folder. So in this way, we are going to run our project and see if it runs successfully. For us to run our project, we are going to use this manage.py file to execute our project and also to execute other commands. So for you to run your project, use py manage.py run server. So for some machines, I believe basing on the version of Python you're using, this command always changes. It can be py might fail to work for you, and then it would require Python the entire word, so it depends on your version. But for my version, I believe this is the right command for me to use. So I'll press enter for me to run the project, and then okay, so it is going to just take a few seconds to load. Now when you run your Django project, Django always runs in a browser, and it sets your project to run on a default URL, which is HTTP, and then the localhost IP address, which is 127.0.0.1 with the port number 8000. So when you copy this and paste it into a browser, it should load your Django project. So by default, Django gives us a home page or welcome page when we create a Django project. So this page you're seeing is created by default. We've not done anything to come up with it. Django also provides an admin panel which you can access by adding /admin. So it has an admin panel which we are going to see how to use it. So this admin panel, like any other system or like any other web application, as admin you need to be having a dashboard where you can manage or control your system. So Django helps you to saves that time of creating an admin panel or dashboard from scratch. So it provides you with an admin dashboard that you can use to manage your application. Alright, so let's dive into the code and see what we have. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and open this code in VS Code. So what I will do is to open this again. I'm going to stop this from running, and then I'm going to open it again in Visual Studio Code by typing code and space dot. So if you have VS Code installed and you type code space dot, it automatically open whatever you're seeing, whatever you're having in the file directory, and then it loads it in VS Code. So don't use that command if you don't have VS Code installed on your machine. So I will advise you to use VS Code. Some prefer PyCharm, but I prefer VS Code for some reasons I talked about in my previous tutorials. Alright, so my project has been created and has been opened, and these are the files that we have. We have the ASCII file, we have the settings.py, we have the URLs, we have the WSCI.py file, which we are going to see the use of each of these files. But the main files for now, for starters, we are interested in the urls.py file and the settings.py. For the ASCII.py and WSCI, the init.py, these ones we are not going to interact with them for now. Let's focus on these two, and yeah, these ones we shall look at them as we go on, as we advance. Alright, so when you look at the project, when you create it, it creates for you these files by default, and then the db.sqlite and the manage.py. So the settings.py file is a file where you configure, where you set your configurations for the project. Whatever changes you want, whatever configurations or settings you want to make on your project, you're supposed to add them to the settings file of the project. We have the installed apps, and in Django, when you create a Django project, by default it installs default applications, one of which we have the admin, we have the auth, we have the content types, sessions, the messages, and static files. So you can use these applications whenever you want to. So they are created or added to your project by Django on creating. We have the middleware, we have the URL config, we have the templates, the web is the WSKI, we have the database configuration. This is your connection string, and it defines which database you're using and where it is located. And so here you specify with the kind of database and location. We shall look at this when it comes to Django databases. Alright, for now just have it in mind that whatever configurations you want to do on your project, you have to set them in the settings.py file. So we have the URLs file. Here we register all our routes or paths in the project. If you want to navigate to any template or application in your Django project, you need to create a route and register it in this file. Okay, so the way we accessed the admin dashboard, when we typed in when we added /admin and we accessed the admin panel, it means this path was already created, and this is how we accessed it. So it points to the application admin and under sites in the admin URLs. We shall see how this comes about. Okay, so that being said, we have the db.sqlite. This is our database. Just have it in mind like that. For now, we shall explore on it more. I'll talk about it when we go to databases. We have the manage.py file. This is the file that helps us to execute different commands. It has got a lot of commands. If I'm to punch it in manage.py without any added command, you can see that it has got a number of commands that we can use that we can execute to add or remove items or components to our project. So there are quite a number of commands, one of which we've used is the run server to run the project, and we've not explored the rest, but we shall go on and we are going to use one by one when need is called for, and then maybe you'll appreciate. So this is a file that helps us to basically execute different commands as we are building the project. So I'm going to run the project again using VS Code terminal. So go to terminal, new terminal, and then it open up this console down, the terminal down. So I'm going to write the command again, py manage.py run server. So run server, like I said, is the command that runs your project, and when you run it like that, it will run your project on default port, which is port 8000, but you can as well specify the port by saying maybe I want my project to run on 9000. You can specify that I want my project to run on 2000, like that. But if you don't specify the port number and you press enter, it will run your project on a default port, which is port 8000. So I'll run it on this default as because I don't have any other application running on port 8000, so it is okay for me to run it on that same port. Alright, now that our project is up and running, so let's go into creating the application. Okay, so what we've just done is to create a Django project. This doesn't mean that we have an application running. A Django project is basically like a container that is going to store all your applications. So a container, the Django project can be a container of one or many Django applications. Okay, sorry about that. So now let's go ahead and create or add an application to our Django project. For us to add our any application or to our Django project, we use still the same file, manage.py, and then we use a command. We use this command start up to add a new application to our project. So let's go ahead and use that command. I'll open new terminal. And then I'll use py manage.py start app, and then followed by the app name. So I'm going to call this my app. Alright, so I'll call it my app, then press enter. Okay, so you can realize that our application has been created. It has got a similar architecture to the main project, but with a few files added to it. We are seeing the admin.py, we are seeing the apps.py, we are seeing the models.py, we are seeing the tests.py and views.py. And then we've got a folder here called migrations. So what does each of these files do? The init.py helps us to connect between different files, or to import different files in one another. So it creates that interconnection. Then the admin.py, it helps us to manage our models. We are going to see how this works. It helps us to add models to our admin panel or dashboard. So we shall see how that works. We have got the apps.py. Now this apps.py is literally like the configurations file, like the way you're seeing this settings.py. I don't know why Django chose to call it apps.py, but basically it is a settings file for your application. Ideally they would have called it maybe config.py or settings.py. So apps.py, the name shouldn't confuse you, it is just a settings file. Alright, so we have the models.py. So here we manage and we create our models from here, all the Django models. Alright, and we have the tests.py. This is where we run our tests in the application. And then we have the views.py. So from the views is where we put all our logic, is where we put all our functions, and from here we can manage the entire logic of the application. Alright, so we are going to see how a Django project works and how basically the architecture is interrelated in these different files. Okay, so what happens when someone when a Django project is running and someone is running a file, let's say this, when someone puts in a route, for example, to access the admin dashboard. If you want to access the admin dashboard, you need to punch in a route that is going to return for you the admin dashboard. Okay, so it means for you to access the admin dashboard, you need to have a route. So we shall need to create our URL files, a URL file that is going to keep our routes that we are going to use to navigate from one template to another or user interface. Alright, so when you punch in this and you press enter, this what happens here is that you send a request to a view, and that view receives that request that I want you to display for me the admin interface. So it is the view that does the logic and all the checks, then it returns the view as you requested. So we are going to see that we are going to be working around with routes and views, and then models for database and data manipulation. Alright, so let's now get rid of this default. Let's get rid of this default Django page that is created, and then we can set up our own home page or welcome page. Now in Django, when it comes to user interfaces, basically we call them templates here, so it shouldn't confuse you with views. Here views, know it that it is where you put your logic. For those who have interacted with other frameworks like maybe Laravel for PHP, those who have interacted with .NET Core for C#, you realize that now the views here are like our controllers. So it's where we put the logic. So when it comes to the actual views or the user interface, now in Django we call them templates. Alright, so for us to add our custom user interface, we need to create a new folder in our application called templates. I'm going to go ahead and create a new folder and I'll call it templates. Alright, so in this folder I'm going to add our home page, and maybe I'll call it index. I'll call it index.html. Alright, so Django understands the name templates. Whenever you add a folder called templates into your application, Django understands this name. So your folder that is going to store all your HTML pages must be named templates. Don't use any other word as far as I know. So I stand to be corrected on that. Alright, so you call your folder templates so that Django can always know that my templates are stored in this folder location. Alright, so we have our index.html. Maybe we are just going to write a simple HTML code, maybe using the header tag, and we can call this home page, and then maybe we can add a paragraph paragraph here that says welcome to Django series by Coding A. Alright, so we are going to render this page whenever Django project we want to access this page from the browser. Okay, so for us to access this page, like I told you, we need to create a route or path that the user is going to input so as to access that page. For example, if we want the user to get it, we can say the user should add something like home, and when they press home, when they add this, they can be in position to access this page. So we need to create a route, or we need to create that path. Alright, so that path, when it is created and the user presses enter, it sends a request to a view. So it means we also need a view that is going to receive the user's request, so that that view can render the template. So we need two things: we need the path and the view. So let's first go in our views and add a view that is going to receive our user's request. Alright, so we are going to use the def keyword for Python functionalities, and maybe we are going to call our function homepage. So this is the function name. This function will always be receiving requests from the user. Alright, and then we are going to put this semicolon, and then we indent. Alright, so the principles of Python still apply when it comes to Django. The indent is key, and then the semicolon, the full colon, for terminating your function. So we are going to use this render function to return our template. Okay, so we are going to return a render function that is going to return. So when you put a function, it is going to also guide you through on which arguments to pass. You see, the one that it highlights blue is the one that is expecting. It has got multiple arguments that it expects, but it highlights blue the one it is expecting. So at the moment it is expecting the request, which is the HTTP request. So we have already our parameter here, so we are just going to pass in the argument here, and we shall call it request. Right, so when you put the request, now it is expecting the template name. So we need to pass in the template name, but not the here it is specifying that I want that template name to be of string. Alright, so we are going to go ahead and specify which template do we want to return or render. So we want to render the index.html, right, but it is supposed to be of string, so we put it in quotes and indicate index.html. So here you might be wondering why we are not adding the folder name, for example templates. Alright, Django understands that all templates are stored in a folder called templates. So this is a reserved name, so it understands it, so we don't need to add it on the path or directory path. Alright, so we go after adding that. For now, let's leave other arguments. We need the request and templates name for now. So we save this change. So now what you have to note, whenever you make changes to your application when it is still running, it will always refresh. In case you get errors, it will stop running. When you don't get any errors, it will continue running. So that's one way of tracking bugs in your application, at least for starters. So whenever you make changes, for you to find it easy for you to troubleshoot, always save and then check if your application is still running. So let me just verify that also mine is still up and running. Alright, so it is still up and running. It means I have no errors. In case I make any errors here and I save, right, even in the terminal it can just show me that I have errors. So let me just refresh and run this project. Right, it should show that I have bugs. Okay, anyway, so we are going to see that as we go on, but just have it in mind. Alright, so we've created our view that is going to receive the user's request, and this view, when it gets the request, it will return the home page. So now we need to create a path which the user will input so that this home page can be accessed. Alright, So for us to add a path, we need to add a file called urls.py to our application. Okay, so we are going to add a file and call it urls.py. This file can be anything, but at least as a programmer you have to give your files meaningful names. So since we are using urls and it is the same architecture, that's why I prefer using urls.py, but you can name it anything. Alright, so in this urls file we are going to create a path that is going to store, we are going to add a URL pattern that is going to store all the different paths or routes that we shall use to access the different pages or templates in our application. Okay, so we need to import a few things in this. First, we need to get access to the views, and we also need to get access to the path, which is a Django function. So we are going to import from Django dot URL import path. All right, so again we need to get access to the views, so we need to import from dot, which means from this project, import views. Okay, so it means we can access any function that will be in our views. If we just specify like this, that from dot import views, it means from this project import the views file. So from the views file we can access any function. If we want to be specific on which function to access, we can just say dot from views, all right, import, and then we specify the function, that home page. Okay, so that way you just import a specific function that you're interested in. Okay, so usually people prefer importing the entire views file. Okay, so we shall leave it at that. Maybe when it reaches on stages where we need to also access other different functions, we shall not need to call one by one. Alright, so when we have those two, it means we can access our view and we can now get this function path that is going to enable us to create the routes. So we are going to just add a comment here that our configurations, maybe configurations for the routes. Right, so for us to create our different routes, we store them in an array which Django understands only a name called URL patterns. Okay, patterns. So Django only understands this name as it is, the same case, the same spelling, so don't use any other name. So this is supposed to be the array name and then equal to array. Right, go to array. So we are going to go ahead and add our paths to this array. So we need a path which we are going to use to access the home page. So the same happens here. When you add this function path, it shows you the expected arguments to pass in the different parameters it has got. So it needs the route. So here we are specifying the route name. What would the user input in the browser? So, and it is saying it is supposed to be of string. So we want the user to put /home. So whenever user wants to access our home page, they just need to put /home. So that's what we want the route to be. And now, which view is receiving that request? So in views, we have the home page. So we want whenever the user inputs this /home, the request to go to the home view, to the home page, a function in our views, so that the home page can be returned. I hope you can understand now that connection between the two files. Okay, so now let me save that. Okay, so when we go to our browser and add home, okay, so you realize that it is telling us page not found. So we need to do something simple. We are just left with one step. Whenever you add a URL file to your application, you need to register this URL file to your application. All right, but for us to register this URL file to the project, we need to first inform the project that we added a new application called my app. Actually, it is best recommended that whenever you add whenever you add an application to your project, you immediately register it, that you inform the project, which I told you is like a container that I've added a new app. So for you to add or register your application, you go to the settings file under install apps, and then you add the application. So our application is called my app. Okay, so this way now your Django project knows that I've got a new application in my project, or stored in me. Okay, so it has been added to these pre-existing applications. So right now we can go ahead and register the URL file that we have here in this main URL file for the project. Alright, so we are going to register our applications URL file to the main URLs py, because now the project knows that this app exists. So we are going to come to this URL patterns and then add a path that will point to our URLs file. So for us to register that URLs.py file, we need to include it here using the include function. That include function is part of the URLs package. So we are just going to add a comma and add include. Right, so we come to the URL and add path. Okay, so our route name this time round is going to be the name of our application. Okay, so that whenever someone on the project puts the name of the application followed by the route, then it knows where to point, because usually you might be having a number of applications running in your project. So we are going to say my app. Okay, that whenever someone runs the project and they add my app followed by anything, do what? Look for the URLs. Look for my app. Alright, we are going now to use the include function here. Okay, include my what? My app URL file. So here you add the URL file, so .url. Let me just be sure of the name I used. It was URLs. So here you have to make sure it is the same name. So this means that whenever someone goes to the project and they add this, right, they add my app. Whenever someone goes to this project and they add my app, okay, then when they add my app, go and look for my app and then use its URLs, okay, instead of this. So what it will do, it will go and, so when we press enter, it will go to my app and then look for the what? For those URLs, okay. So meaning that at this point here, it will go to our app and then look for this file and then look for any route that the user will add. So right now, if we add home, we expect our application to render. So it is telling us this. It means we did something here. We are missing out something. So let's go back and troubleshoot that. So let's go to our URLs file here. Okay, this is okay. And then we go to the URLs for the application. Alright, so we remove this and maybe we can add it here. Okay, so when you refresh this, okay, you see, so our home page is rendered and returned successfully. So at this point here, if you've been following while doing what I'm doing on your machine, I expect you to have a running project with an active home page. So I want to congratulate you upon creating your Django project and having your Django application running. Okay, so in the next tutorials we are going to look at the Django navigating from one maybe the home page to other, about from one template to another. And then we shall look at the Django models, we shall look at the Django database, we are going to also look at the Django forms and so on. So I request you to just keep track on what is happening and the content I keep on uploading. Thank you so much, and let's stop here. We meet in the next tutorial.